When Dr. Richardson looked me in the eye and said 6 months, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled. Because finally someone was going to miss me when I was gone. I know how twisted that sounds. What kind of mother feels relief when handed a death sentence? But sitting in that cold office, all I could think was, finally I matter enough to mourn. Dr. Richardson kept talking, something about aggressive pancreatic cancer treatment options, but his words floated past me. I was 52 years old, and this was the first time in decades that someone looked directly at me, spoke to me like I existed, even if that existence had an expiration date. Mrs. Chun, do you understand what I'm telling you? He was younger than my son David, this doctor, with soft hands that had never scrubbed floors or packed lunches at midnight. But he held my life in those hands now. That made him important. That made me important. I understand. For the first time in years, I understood my place perfectly. I was dying, and that gave me value. He slid a pamphlet across his desk and I almost laughed. I'd been living with terminal invisibility for 25 years. This was just more honest. We need to start treatment immediately, Dr. Richardson said, already reaching for his prescription pad. There's a specialized program at Presbyterian Medical Center. Very aggressive, very promising. We can get you enrolled by next week. Next week? When was the last time anyone had been in a hurry for me? This urgency felt like champagne in my veins. What do I need to do? Just paperwork. We'll handle everything else. He was writing, barely looking at me. The financial coordinator will contact you about insurance. This treatment is expensive, but your coverage should handle it. Expensive. I bought generic cereal and hadn't bought new clothes in 3 years. But cancer was worth spending money on. I walked to my car clutching the pamphlet. 6 months. Felt like forever and no time at all. My phone buzzed. Emma, can you pick up coffee creamer? And we're out of that good bread again. I stared at the text. Tomorrow I would tell her that her mother was dying. Tonight she wanted coffee creamer. The request felt surreal, like receiving a grocery list from another lifetime. But as I started the car, I smiled again. Tomorrow everything would change. Emma would look up from her laptop. David would put down his phone. They would see me, really see me, maybe for the first time since their father died. I had been practicing disappearing for so long that I'd almost perfected it. I spoke quietly, took up no space, anticipated everyone's needs before they knew they had them. I had become background music in my own life. But dead mothers get remembered. Dead mothers get eulogies full of regret and love that came too late. Dead mothers become saints in the memories of children who barely noticed them breathing. As I pulled out of the parking garage, I caught movement in my rearview mirror. A nurse from Dr. Richardson's office stood near the entrance, talking on her phone. I was too far away to hear clearly, but I thought I caught my name. Yes, the Chun case. Dr. Richardson wants to fast-track her into the program. I slowed, straining to hear more, but a car honked behind me. When I looked back, she was gone. Probably just coordinating my treatment. But something felt off about the urgency in her voice. I shook my head. This was what happened when you spent years being nobody. You started imagining conspiracies about finally being somebody. 6 months. As I drove home past the grocery store where I'd shopped for 25 years, past the elementary school where my children had once needed me every day, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. Tomorrow I would matter. Tomorrow they would listen. Tomorrow, the woman who had been invisible would finally be seen. Even if I had to die to make it happen. The house looked the same, but everything felt different. The chipped paint, the overgrown bushes, the newspapers I'd forgotten to cancel. All of it suddenly seemed temporary. Like a movie set waiting to be torn down. I stood in my own driveway, keys heavy in my hand. In 6 months someone else would stand here. Emma, probably trying to figure out what to do with a house that had never felt like home to anyone but me. The front door stuck like always. David kept promising to fix it, and I had to shoulder it open. The sound echoed through the house, but no one came to help. No one ever did. Mom! Emma's voice drifted from the basement, annoyed. That you? Who else would it be? But I'd stopped saying things like that years ago. Yes, honey. I'm home. The living room looked like a tornado had hit it. David's business papers covered every surface. Another get-rich-quick scheme involving cryptocurrency that I didn't understand. His laptop sat open on my coffee table, next to 3 empty energy drink cans and a plate with sandwich crusts. Crusts I'd cut off for him this morning. He was 25 and I was still cutting his crusts. Emma's art supplies had invaded the dining room. Canvases leaned against walls, paint tubes squeezed from the middle. Never the end despite my suggestions, creating chaos on my mother's antique table. The table I'd been saving for special occasions that never came. Emma? David? Come up here. I need to talk to you. In a minute. Emma called back. I'm Busse. David appeared from the kitchen, phone glued to his ear. He held up one finger, the universal sign for not now, and kept talking. Something about market volatility and blockchain. Words I'd heard for months without ever seeing a paycheck. I sat on my own couch and waited. This was what I'd been doing for years, waiting for my children to have time for me in my own house. But today was different. Today I had news that would make them listen. 20 minutes later, Emma emerged from the basement, paint under her fingernails. David moved to the kitchen, still on his phone, but at least in the same room. What's up, Mom? Emma settled into her father's chair, the one she'd claimed the day after his funeral. You look weird. You sick or something? The question was so perfect I almost laughed. Actually, yes. I am sick. That got David's attention. He ended his call and looked at me directly for the first time in weeks. What do you mean, sick? Emma's tone was more annoyed than concerned. I took a breath. This was the moment I'd imagined during the entire drive home. The moment they would finally see me. I went to the doctor today. I have cancer. Pancreatic cancer. It's terminal. The silence wasn't what I'd expected. No sharp breath, no tears, no rush to embrace me. It was calculating. I could see wheels turning in both their heads. Emma spoke first. How long? 6 months, maybe less. David leaned against the counter, arms crossed. What does that mean for? I mean, have you talked to anyone about? He gestured around the house. About what, David? You know, the will. Life insurance. The house. He looked embarrassed but didn't stop. I'm just saying we should get organized. Make sure everything's in order. I stared at my son. 8 years ago, he'd sobbed in my arms when his father died. Now he was talking about my death like a business meeting. Emma nodded along. David's right. We should be practical. And Mom, I've been thinking, when the time comes, I'd like to plan your memorial. I have beautiful ideas. Very artistic, very meaningful. Dad's was so boring. I'm not dead yet. Of course not. Emma rushed to say. I just mean when you're ready to talk about it, I have ideas. I've been researching sustainable burial options. There are gorgeous biodegradable urns that become trees. You could become a cherry blossom. They were planning my funeral. I was sitting right there, still breathing, and they were planning my funeral. What about treatment? I asked. The doctor mentioned a program. Is it worth it though? David interrupted. I mean, if it's terminal anyway, why put yourself through that? Why put us through it? Like my cancer was something I was doing to them. Emma was nodding. David's right. Quality of life is more important than quantity. And honestly, Mom, you've seemed so tired lately. So worn out. Maybe this is just natural. Natural. My death was natural. My life apparently had been the problem. I looked around the room, at David's mess, at Emma's art supplies, at the house I'd maintained for 2 decades while they lived their lives around me but never with me. They'd been practicing for my death for years. I'd been a ghost long before Dr. Richardson made it official. There's life insurance, I said, filling the silence. How much? David asked immediately. David, Emma scolded, but I saw the interest in her eyes too. It's okay. It's a reasonable question. Enough to pay off the house and have some left over. I watched my children exchange a look. A quick glance that said everything about how they'd already divided up my death. Emma would get the emotional satisfaction of a beautiful memorial. David would get the financial security. They'd both get the house they'd been living in for free. What they wouldn't get was me. But they'd never really had me anyway. That evening I sat alone at the kitchen table, eating cereal for dinner while they ordered Thai food in the living room. They didn't ask if I wanted any. They never did. But tonight I understood why. In their minds I was already gone. Had been for years. The only difference was now it had a timeline. Linda hit my driveway like a thunderstorm. All energy and fury and the kind of presence that rearranged everything around her. I heard her rental car before I saw it, the engine cutting off with a decisive click that somehow sounded pissed off. Through the kitchen window, I watched my sister unfold herself from the driver's seat, all 5'2" of her radiating the kind of anger that had gotten her kicked out of 3 nursing programs before she found one tough enough to handle her mouth. She didn't knock. Linda had never knocked in 52 years, and cancer wasn't going to change that. Where are they? She demanded, dropping her purse on my counter hard enough to rattle the sugar bowl. Where are who? Your kids. The ones who should be here taking care of you instead of leaving you to eat cereal alone, while they order takeout 20 feet away. I looked down at my bowl, suddenly ashamed. How did you? I could smell the pad thai from the driveway, Margaret. And I can see the cereal box on the counter. Linda's dark eyes, so much like mine but fiercer, swept over my kitchen like she was documenting a crime scene. When did you eat last? A real meal, not sugar-coated cardboard. I had a sandwich. When? I couldn't remember. Yesterday, maybe. Time had become liquid since the diagnosis. Hours bleeding into each other like watercolors in rain. Linda opened my refrigerator and made a disgusted sound. Expired milk, week-old Chinese food, and enough energy drinks to kill a horse. This is how you're living. Linda, it's fine. I'm fine. She turned to face me, and something cracked in her expression. The anger melted into something softer and infinitely more dangerous. No, Makye. You're not fine. You haven't been fine for a long time, have you? The childhood nickname hit me like a physical blow. Nobody had called me Maggie since Mom died. I'd become just Mom to my children and Mrs. Chun to everyone else, even to myself. Tell me about the diagnosis, Linda said, settling across from me. She was wearing scrubs. She'd come straight from her shift at Phoenix General, caught the first flight after my call. Everything. Don't leave anything out. So I told her. About Dr. Richardson's office, the pamphlet, the specialized treatment program. Linda listened without interrupting, but I could see her processing, filing away details with the precision of someone who'd spent 20 years fighting medical bureaucracy. 6 months, she repeated. Pancreatic cancer. Aggressive. Yes. And you're okay with this? The question caught me off guard. Okay with dying. Okay with giving up. Linda leaned forward. Maggie, when was the last time you fought for something? Really fought? I opened my mouth then closed it. When had I fought for anything?
Ide nagutiata, cum promisa, acum mudata.
I'd bent myself into shapes that fit other people's needs until I'd forgotten my original form. I'm 52 years old, Linda.
I'm tired.
You're 52 years old and you've been tired since you were 32. There's a difference. She reached across and took my hands. Her fingers were warm, solid, callous from real work. Tell me about the tests. What exactly did they do? Blood work. Scans. The usual. Which scans? When? Who ordered them? Dr. Richardson handled everything. It was all very fast. Linda's grip tightened. How fast? 3 weeks, maybe? I had some stomach pain, went to my regular doctor. He referred me to Dr. Richardson and 3 weeks. Linda's voice went flat. Maggie, do you know how long it usually takes to get an oncologist appointment in this city? I shook my head. 3 months. Minimum. Unless it's life or death. She stood up, pacing to the window. What kind of stomach pain? Just discomfort. After eating. Weight loss? Jaundice? Changes in your stool? Linda, I don't. Answer me.
No.
No to all of it. The admission felt strange. I'd been so focused on having cancer that I'd never examined whether I felt like someone who had cancer. Linda turned back, and there was something dangerous in her expression. Something that reminded me why she'd been the one to stand up to our father when he drank, why she'd challenged teachers who underestimated us, why she'd never learned to make herself small like I had. We're getting a second opinion. Linda, we're getting a second opinion, and we're getting your medical records, and we're asking questions until someone gives us answers that make sense. But Dr. Richardson said, Dr. Richardson can say whatever he wants. Doesn't make it true. She sat back down, her voice gentling. Maggie, when Mom was dying, what did she tell us? I remembered. Of course I remembered. Trust but verify. Trust but verify. She didn't say trust blindly. She said verify. Linda's eyes were bright with something that might have been tears or rage. When did you stop verifying, Maggie? When did you decide other people's versions of your life were more accurate than your own? I couldn't answer. The answer went back too far, through too many years of small defeats, until I'd become someone who accepted death sentences with relief.
I'm scared, he whispered.
Of dying. Of hoping. Linda reached across again. But this time she held my hands like she was anchoring me to something solid. Then don't hope yet. Just question. Just verify. Can you do that much? Through the doorway I could hear Emma and David laughing at something on TV. The sound felt distant, like it was coming from another house, another life. A life where I'd been background noise for so long that my absence wouldn't register. But Linda saw me. Linda had always seen me, even when I'd forgotten how to see myself. Okay, I said. Okay, let's ask some questions. For the first time in years I felt like myself again. Not the tired ghost I'd become, but Margaret Chun. Maggie. The woman Linda remembered, even when I'd forgotten she existed. Linda spread my medical records across the kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. The overhead light cast harsh shadows, making everything look official and ominous. I sat beside her, clutching my third cup of coffee, watching her work with surgical precision. This is wrong, she muttered, holding up a lab report. Look at this date. I squinted at the paper. Numbers and medical words swam together. What am I looking at? Your CA19 to 9 levels. The tumor marker for pancreatic cancer. She pointed to a circled number. This result is from March 15th. Okay. Maggie, today is April 3rd. You told me you first saw your doctor about stomach pain 3 weeks ago. I counted backward. Right. March 20th. Linda's finger moved to another date. But this test was ordered for March 15th, 5 days before you even saw a doctor. The kitchen felt like it was shrinking. That can't be right. It's right. Lab stamp, technician's initials, everything. She pulled out another sheet. And look at your CT scan. She'd highlighted passages in yellow, but the medical terminology still looked like a foreign language. Heterogeneous pancreatic enhancement. Possible mass effect. What does this mean? It means they found something that could be a tumor. Could be. But look at the radiologist's note. I read where she pointed. Clinical correlation recommended. Findings are subtle and may represent normal variation. Additional imaging suggested to rule out artifacts. They're not sure, Linda said. The radiologist is basically saying this might be nothing, let's double check. But somehow between this uncertain scan and Dr. Richardson's office, might be nothing became definitely dying in 6 months. Something cold spread through my chest. You think it's a mistake? I think it's something. And we need to talk to someone who doesn't profit from your diagnosis. That's when Emma appeared in the doorway, looking rumpled and irritated. What are you guys doing? She asked, eyeing the medical record suspiciously. Reviewing your mother's test results, Linda said without looking up. Why? Emma's voice sharpened. The doctor already explained everything. Mom has cancer. It's terminal. We need to accept that and move on. Move on to what exactly? Linda's tone was dangerously mild. Emma shifted uncomfortably. You know what I mean. We need to focus on making Mom comfortable, helping her tie up loose ends. I've already started planning the memorial. She's not dead yet. I know that. But we have to be practical. Mom's finally gotten some clarity about her situation, and you're trying to confuse her with all this second guessing. Linda stood up slowly and I saw Emma take a step back. My sister had always been small, but when truly angry she seemed to expand. Clarity, Linda repeated. Your mother gets a death sentence and you call that clarity? Better than false hope. False hope. Linda's voice was deadly quiet. Emma, your mother has spent 8 years making herself invisible in this house. She cooks for you, cleans for you, pays your bills, asks for nothing. The first time in years anyone pays attention to her, it's because she's dying. And you're worried about false hope. Emma's face flushed. That's not fair. We love Mom. Love her how? By treating her like hired help? By ordering takeout while she eats cereal alone? By planning her funeral before she's even started treatment? We're being realistic. You're being convenient. Linda stepped closer. It's convenient that Mom is dying, isn't it? Convenient that you don't have to feel guilty about using her anymore. Convenient that you can frame your neglect as acceptance. Linda, please. I started, but she held up a hand.
No, Maggie.
Someone needs to say this. She turned back to Emma. Your mother matters. Her life matters. Her questions matter. And if you can't handle that, you can find somewhere else to live while we figure out what's really going on. Emma's mouth opened and closed. You can't kick me out. This is my home too. This is your mother's home. You're a guest who's forgotten her manners. David wandered in then, still in yesterday's clothes, phone in hand. What's all the yelling about? Your aunt thinks Mom's doctors are wrong, Emma said quickly. She's trying to give her false hope. David looked between us, calculating which side would benefit him most. Look, Aunt Linda, I get that you're upset. We all are. But doctors know what they're doing. Mom's sick, and we need to deal with reality. What reality is that, David? That Mom's dying. That we need to make arrangements. That fighting about it won't change anything. Linda turned to me, and something broke in her expression. Is this what you want, Maggie? You want to lie down and die because it's easier than asking questions. The kitchen went silent. I could hear the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking, my own breathing. Emma and David were staring at me, waiting for me to choose sides, waiting for me to be the peacemaker I'd always been. But I looked at my medical records scattered across the table, at dates that didn't line up, at uncertainty disguised as certainty. I thought about Dr. Richardson's rushed manner, the mysterious phone call, the treatment program that seemed too convenient. I thought about 3 weeks of being important, of being seen, of mattering to my children for the first time in years. And I realized that even if the diagnosis was wrong, even if I wasn't dying, I'd still be invisible again. I'd still be the woman who ate cereal alone. I'd still be nobody. I don't know what I want, I said finally. But I want to know what's true. Emma made a frustrated sound.
Mom, no.
The word came out stronger than I'd intended. Linda's right. I have a right to ask questions. I have a right to understand what's happening to my own body. You're making a mistake, David said. You're going to end up disappointed. Maybe. But disappointment meant I'd hoped for something. And hope, even false hope, was better than the slow death I'd been living. We're getting a second opinion, I said. We're going to ask every question we can think of until someone gives us answers that make sense. Linda smiled at me, proud and fierce. Now you're talking like my sister. For the first time since Robert died, I felt like I was. Dr. Sarah Kim looked nothing like Dr. Richardson. Where he'd been smooth and rushed, she was thoughtful and present. Where his office felt sterile and corporate, hers felt lived in, with actual books and a coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Oncologist." She was maybe 40, with kind eyes and the sort of calm that made you believe she'd actually listen. "Mrs. Chun," she said, settling into her chair with my file open. "I've reviewed all your records and I have to say I'm confused." Linda squeezed my hand. We'd waited 3 days for this appointment. 3 days of Emma's cold silence and David's pointed comments about wasting time and money on delusions. But Linda had been relentless, calling every oncologist in the city. Confused how? I asked. Dr. Kim put on reading glasses and opened my file. "Let's start with your symptoms. You mentioned stomach discomfort after eating. How severe on a scale of 1 to 10? Maybe a 3? For at most. It wasn't even pain, really. Just uncomfortable." She made a note. "Weight loss?"
No.
"Maybe a pound or 2, but I've been trying to eat less." "Changes in bowel movements? Jaundice? Fatigue beyond normal levels?" I shook my head to each question, watching her frown deepen. "Mrs. Chun, pancreatic cancer is called the silent killer because by the time symptoms appear, it's usually advanced. But advanced pancreatic cancer doesn't whisper. It screams. Patients typically have significant weight loss, debilitating pain, jaundice." She looked at me over her glasses. "You look like someone with mild indigestion, not terminal cancer. But the tests? Let's talk about the tests." Dr. Kim pulled out several sheets. "Your CA19 to 9 tumor marker is elevated, yes. But it's elevated to 52. Normal range is 0 to 37, so you're barely outside normal. I've seen patients with pancreatitis, inflammation, not cancer, with levels in the hundreds." Linda leaned forward. "What about the CT scan?" "The scan shows some irregularity in pancreatic texture, but the radiologist specifically noted it could be normal variation. He recommended additional imaging to rule out artifact." Dr. Kim flipped through more pages. "But I don't see any follow-up scans." Dr. Richardson went straight from possible finding to terminal diagnosis. The room tilted. "Are you saying I don't have cancer?" "I'm saying the evidence doesn't support a diagnosis of terminal pancreatic cancer. More importantly, someone should have done more testing before delivering that kind of news." Dr. Kim's expression darkened. Mrs. Chun, who referred you to Dr. Richardson? My primary care physician, Dr. Patel. I'm going to call Dr. Patel's office. She reached for her phone. Something about this timeline doesn't add up. While she made the call, I sat in stunned silence. Linda was gripping my hand so tightly I could feel her pulse. The conversation was brief, mostly yes or no questions. Interesting, she said when she hung up. Dr. Patel says he never referred you to Dr. Richardson. In fact, he's never heard of Dr. Richardson. That's impossible. The appointment was scheduled through his office. According to Dr. Patel's nurse, you called asking for an oncology referral because you'd already been told you needed a specialist. She assumed you'd gotten the recommendation elsewhere and just helped you make the appointment. The world shifted sideways. But I didn't ask for a referral. I went to Dr. Patel about stomach pain, and his nurse called me back saying they'd scheduled me with Dr. Richardson. Dr. Kim was quiet, making notes. Mrs. Chun, I need to ask you about Dr. Richardson and his practice. Do you remember the hospital where he's affiliated? Presbyterian Medical Center. He mentioned a specialized treatment program. More typing. After a few minutes, she turned her screen toward us. Mrs. Chun, there is no Dr. Richardson on the medical staff at Presbyterian Medical Center. In fact, there's no Dr. Richardson licensed to practice oncology in this state. The words hit like physical blows. What are you saying? I'm saying you may have been the victim of medical fraud. Dr. Kim's voice was gentle but firm. I need to make some calls. To the medical board, to your insurance company, possibly to law enforcement. Linda found her voice first. How is this possible? How does someone just pretend to be a doctor? More easily than you'd think. Medical fraud is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Fake clinics, unnecessary procedures, phantom treatments. It's more common than people realize. Dr. Kim pulled out a business card. Mrs. Chun, I want you to contact this investigator. She specializes in medical fraud cases. I stared at the card, unable to process what I was hearing. So I'm not dying? Based on what I see here, you have mild gastritis. Inflammation of the stomach lining, probably caused by stress. Treatable with diet changes and maybe an antacid. Stress, I repeated numbly. Stress, Dr. Kim confirmed, which, given what you've been through these past few weeks, makes perfect sense. As we left Dr. Kim's office, I felt like I was floating. The world looked the same. Same parking garage, same gray Seattle sky. But everything had fundamentally changed. I wasn't dying. I was perfectly, ordinarily, disappointingly healthy. Maggie. Linda's voice seemed to come from far away. Talk to me. I don't know what I'm feeling, I said honestly. We sat in the car, engine off, neither of us ready to go home. Relief. Some. But also. I struggled for words. Linda, for 3 weeks I mattered. My children looked at me when I spoke. They asked how I was feeling. Emma actually hugged me yesterday, for the first time since her father's funeral. Linda was quiet, letting me work through it. I know how sick this sounds. I know how twisted it is to want to keep cancer just so my own children will love me. But that's what I'm thinking. Going home and telling them I'm fine, and watching them go back to ignoring me. Emma moving back to her basement, David back to his phone calls, me back to eating cereal alone. Maggie, someone tried to kill me, Linda. Not with a gun or knife, but with lies and fake treatments, and I stopped a horrible thought occurring. The treatment program. Dr. Richardson said it was expensive. What if I'd said yes? What would have happened to me? Linda's face went pale. We need to call that investigator. Now. But first we had to go home. We had to tell Emma and David that their inheritance had evaporated, That their mother was going to keep existing, keep needing things, keep taking up space in their lives. As Linda started the car, I realized that being told you're dying is devastating. But finding out someone lied about it, that's a different kind of death sentence entirely. Because now I had to figure out how to live again. And I wasn't sure I remembered how. Detective Rachel Torres looked like someone who'd spent her career dealing with people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. Short gray hair, sharp eyes, and the kind of no bullshit energy that made you want to confess things you hadn't even done. Mrs. Chun, she said, settling into the chair across from my kitchen table, you're not the first person to contact me about this scheme. You're victim number 17. 17. The number slapped me across the face. 17 women? 17 that we know of. All widows or single women between 45 and 65. All with good insurance. All told they had terminal cancer requiring immediate, expensive treatment. Linda had made coffee, but my hands were shaking too badly to lift the cup. What happened to the others? Detective Torres opened a thick file. 6 women went through with the treatment before we caught on. They're fine now, medically speaking, but they endured months of unnecessary chemotherapy, radiation, surgical procedures. Their insurance companies were billed over $13 million total. $13 million, I whispered. The treatment centers were fake, staffed with real nurses who thought they were working for legitimate facilities. The doctors running the show had medical degrees, but were using stolen licenses, operating under false identities. She pulled out a photograph. Is this the man who called himself Dr. Richardson? I stared at the picture. Same smooth face, same expensive suit, same soft hands. But the name underneath read, Dr. Marcus Webb. His real name is Marcus Webb, Detective Torres continued. Former pharmaceutical sales rep who lost his job for falsifying research data. No medical degree, no license. He's been running these scams across 3 states. How? Linda asked. How does someone just walk into a medical office and start diagnosing people? He rents office space in medical buildings, uses stolen letterhead, hires legitimate staff who think they're working for a real practice. By the time anyone catches on, he's moved to the next city. Torres looked directly at me. Mrs. Chun, you may have saved lives by getting that second opinion. We've been trying to build a case for months. The weight of that statement settled over me. Other women like me, women who felt invisible, had been targeted. Women who might not have sisters like Linda to ask questions. What do you need from me? I asked. Your story. On the record. And Mrs. Chun, Torres leaned forward. The media is very interested in this case. Medical fraud targeting vulnerable women is a story that resonates. If you're willing to go public, it could help us reach other victims who might not know they've been scammed. Go public. The idea terrified and thrilled me. What would that mean? Interviews. Newspaper articles. Television news segments. Your face and story, out there for everyone to see. I thought about Emma and David, how they'd react to their mother becoming a public figure. About neighbors seeing me on the news, learning that I'd been foolish enough to fall for such an elaborate lie. But I also thought about those other women. About the 6 who'd endured real chemotherapy for fake cancer. About the ones who might be sitting in fake doctors' offices right now, being told they had 6 months to live. I'll do it, I said. The first interview was with a local newspaper reporter named Sarah Martinez. She was young, maybe Emma's age, but she listened with an intensity that reminded me of Linda. She asked hard questions about how I'd fallen for the scheme, why I hadn't questioned the diagnosis, what red flags I'd missed. Mrs. Chun, she said gently, can you help me understand why you didn't question the diagnosis more from the beginning? I thought about how to explain it, the years of being invisible, the strange relief of finally maturing, How I'd become so used to accepting other people's versions of my life that I'd stopped trusting my own instincts. When you've spent years being told that your thoughts and feelings don't matter, I said finally, you stop believing they do. I was so used to being wrong about my own life that it never occurred to me to question someone else's opinion about my death. The article ran on a Sunday morning with the headline "Local Woman Exposes Multi-million-dollar Medical Fraud Targeting Vulnerable Women." My photograph, professional, dignified, serious, took up half the front page of the Metro section. Within hours my phone was ringing. Other newspapers wanted interviews. Television stations were calling. But more importantly, women were reaching out. Women who'd received similar diagnoses. Women who'd been pressured into expensive treatments. Women who'd felt something was wrong, but hadn't known how to voice their concerns. Emma found me in the kitchen that evening, laptop open, responding to emails from strangers who'd seen the article. "Mom," she said, and something in her voice was different. Smaller. "I saw the newspaper." I looked up at her. "What did you think?" "I think," she stopped, started again. "I think I didn't know who you were. I mean, I knew you were my mom, but I didn't know you were this. Someone who could stand up in front of reporters and speak for other people. I didn't know either. The woman in that photograph looks." Emma struggled for words. "She looks important. Like someone whose opinion matters." I saved the email I'd been writing to a woman in Portland who'd been told she had ovarian cancer and was suspicious of her doctor's rush to schedule surgery. "Do you know why I looked important in that photograph, Emma?" She shook her head. "Because for the first time in years I was doing something that mattered. Something bigger than making sure there's coffee creamer in the refrigerator, or that your laundry gets folded." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for how we treated you. For how I treated you. I know you are. Can I ask you something?" She sat down across from me, in the same chair where Linda had spread out my medical records just a week ago. "When you thought you were dying, were you happy about it?" The question was so direct, so honest, that it deserved an equally honest answer. Part of me was yes. The part that was tired of being invisible. "But you're not invisible," Emma protested. "You're our mom. We love you. Love isn't the same as seeing someone, Emma. You can love someone and still treat them like they're not really there." She was quiet for a long time, processing that. "What happens now? Now I keep telling my story. I help other women who've been targeted. And I figure out what it means to be alive and visible at the same time. And us? What happens to us?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. She was 28 years old and scared. Scared that her mother had become someone she didn't recognize. Someone who might not need her anymore. "That depends," I said. "Do you want to know who I am when I'm not just your mother? Are you interested in meeting Margaret Chan?" Emma wiped her eyes and nodded. "I'd like that very much." It was a start. Not forgiveness, not yet. But acknowledgement. Recognition. The beginning of being seen. The second television interview aired on Good Morning Seattle 3 days later. The segment was only 8 minutes, but those 8 minutes changed everything. My phone didn't stop ringing. The foundation I was starting, tentatively called the Margaret Chan Foundation for Medical Advocacy, received its first donations before I'd even filed the paperwork. But the most important call came from a woman named Patricia in Spokane. "Mrs. Chan," she said, her voice shaky, "I saw you on TV this morning. I think the same thing is happening to me." I grabbed a notepad, my heart racing. "Tell me everything." Patricia's story was almost identical to mine. Terminal diagnosis, rushed timeline, expensive treatment program, insurance that would cover everything. But she'd been suspicious from the beginning. Her daughter was a nurse, and something about the doctor's explanations hadn't added up. "I have an appointment tomorrow for my first treatment," she said. Should I go? No, I said firmly. Don't go anywhere near that place. Get a second opinion first. I can give you the name of a real oncologist. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and cried. Not from sadness, but from something that felt like purpose. For the first time in my adult life, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. Linda found me there 20 minutes later, tears still wet on my cheeks. Good tears or bad tears? She asked. Good tears. Very good tears. What happened? I told her about Patricia, about the other calls I'd received, about the women who were questioning their diagnoses because they'd heard my story. You're saving lives, Maggie. We're saving lives, I corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Linda sat down beside me and took my hand. You know what Mom would say if she were here? What? She'd say you finally stopped practicing being dead and started practicing being alive. That night I couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety or fear, but from excitement. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to tomorrow. I had meetings with lawyers about the foundation, interviews scheduled with 3 more news outlets, and a stack of emails from women who needed help. I was 52 years old and I was just getting started. The settlement check arrived on a Tuesday morning in November, 7 months after I'd been told I had 6 months to live. The amount was staggering $2.3 million. The exact cost of the fraudulent treatment program I barely escaped. Blood money, Linda called it. Justice money, Detective Torres said. I just called it heavy. Emma was making actual breakfast when the certified mail arrived. Scrambled eggs and toast. Not the cereal and coffee combination I'd survived on for years. She'd moved out of the basement 3 weeks ago, into a small apartment across town, but she'd started coming by in the mornings. Not to ask for anything, not to use the Wi-Fi or raid the refrigerator, but to sit with me while I drank coffee and she ate the breakfast she'd prepared. What's that? She asked, nodding at the thick envelope I was turning over in my hands. The settlement. I'd known it was coming. My lawyer had called yesterday, but holding it felt surreal. From the lawsuit. Emma stopped chewing. How much? Enough. I set the envelope on the counter unopened. More than enough. Aren't you going to look? Eventually. I topped off my coffee, enjoying the luxury of taking my time. Everything in my life had operated on other people's schedules for so long that I'd forgotten I could choose when to do things. Tell me about your art show first. Emma's face transformed. Actually lit up, like someone had switched on a lamp behind her eyes. The gallery owner loved the new pieces. The ones I painted after. Well, after everything. She wants to feature them in the spring show. The angry paintings? That's what Emma called them. The series she'd started painting after the truth came out. Dark, jagged compositions that looked like grief and fury had made it and produced something beautiful. The honest paintings, she corrected. I'm calling the series Visible Women. Each one is a portrait of a woman who's been overlooked or dismissed. I started with you. She'd shown me the painting of me last week. Not the tired, accommodating version of myself that had existed for years, but something fiercer. A woman with my face but Linda's eyes. Someone who looked like she had things to say and intended to be heard. I'm proud of you, I said, and meant it. Emma's art had always been pretty decorative. These new pieces had teeth. I'm proud of you too. She hesitated. Mom, can I ask you something? Always. Are you happy? I mean really happy. Not just relieved that you're not dying, but actually happy. It was a question I'd been asking myself for months. Happy felt too simple for what I was experiencing. I was angry, furious actually about the years I'd lost to invisibility. I was sad about the woman I'd allowed myself to become. But underneath all of that, yes, there was something that might be happiness. Or maybe it was just the absence of the constant low-level grief I'd carried for so long. I'm interested, I said finally, in my own life, in other people's stories, in what happens next. I haven't felt interested in anything for years. Emma nodded like that made perfect sense. David came by yesterday, she said carefully. Oh. He wanted to know if you'd talked to me about the money. If you'd made any decisions about distributions. David's relationship with my survival had been more complicated than Emma's. Where Emma had moved toward shame and then tentative reconciliation, David had settled into a kind of sulky resentment. He'd lost an inheritance, and he couldn't quite forgive me for not actually dying to provide it. What did you tell him? I told him it wasn't any of my business what you do with your money. Emma's voice was firm. And that maybe he should try having a conversation with you that doesn't involve asking for things. I smiled despite myself. You've gotten very wise, Emma-chan. I've gotten very aware of how awful I was. She finished her eggs and carried her plate to the sink, actually washed it, dried it, put it away. Small courtesies that would have been invisible 6 months ago but felt revolutionary now. Mom, can I tell you something? Of course. When I thought you were dying, I wasn't sad about losing you. I was sad about losing the idea of you. The fantasy that someday we'd have a real relationship, that I'd become a better daughter, that you'd get to see me succeed at something meaningful. She turned to face me, leaning against the counter. But I never actually planned to make any of that happen while you were alive. And now I'm trying to figure out how to love you while you're here instead of planning to miss you when you're gone. It was the most honest thing Emma had ever said to me. Raw and uncomfortable and real in a way that felt like the beginning of something genuine. We have time to figure it out, I said. Do we? I mean, I know you're not dying anymore, but are you staying? Here in this house, in this life? It was a fair question. The Margaret Chun Foundation for Medical Advocacy was growing faster than I'd anticipated. Women from across the country were reaching out, sharing stories of medical gaslighting, diagnostic dismissal, fraudulent treatment schemes. I had speaking engagements lined up, a book deal pending, consulting opportunities with patient advocacy groups. I could live anywhere, do anything, become anyone. I'm staying, I said. But not the same. I'm keeping the house because I love this kitchen. And I'm keeping my relationships with people who want to know the real me. And the people who don't? I thought about David, about his angry phone calls demanding to know why I was wasting the settlement money on strangers instead of family. About former friends who'd emerged from the woodwork once my story made the news, suddenly interested in rekindling relationships they'd ignored for years. Those people can adjust or find somewhere else to be. Emma grinned. Very wise, Margaret Chun. Margaret Chun. Not Mom, not Mrs. Chun, but the full name of a complete person. Felt right. I finally opened the settlement envelope, more for ceremony than curiosity. The check was impressive, all those zeros lined up like soldiers, but what struck me was the memo line. For damages suffered and justice delayed. Justice delayed. That felt accurate. But not justice denied. Emma, I said, folding the check and slipping it into my purse. Would you like to come with me to the bank? And then maybe lunch? Somewhere nice where we can sit and talk like two adults who choose to spend time together. I'd love that, she said. And for the first time in years I believed her. Outside, the November sky was gray and heavy with the promise of rain, but the air felt clean. Washed. Ready for whatever came next. I was ready too. 6 months. That's how long Dr. Richardson Marcus Webb had given me to live. Today marked exactly 6 months since that appointment, and I was sitting in my kitchen at 6 a.m., drinking coffee and reading emails from women I'd never met but somehow knew intimately. Dear Mrs. Chen, one began, I saw your interview on Good Morning America and I think my doctor might be lying to me too. Another, thank you for speaking up. Because of your story, I got a second opinion and found out my terminal diagnosis was actually a treatable condition. And another, I've been invisible in my own family for 15 years. Your foundation helped me find my voice. The Margaret Chen Foundation had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. What started as simple victim advocacy had evolved into a comprehensive resource for women navigating medical gaslighting, diagnostic errors, and family dismissal. We had a hotline, support groups, a network of volunteer patient advocates, and partnerships with medical schools teaching doctors how to actually listen to their female patients. Linda appeared in my kitchen doorway, key in hand, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the Good Place downtown. She'd been staying with me for the past month, ostensibly to help with foundation business, but really because neither of us wanted to be alone anymore. We'd both spent too many years isolated, and we discovered that sisterhood was better the second time around. Any good ones today? She asked, nodding at my laptop screen. All of them are good ones. I turned the screen toward her. Look at this. A woman in Tampa whose daughter saw our website and convinced her to question her cancer diagnosis. Turned out to be a benign cyst. Another life saved by asking questions. Linda settled into the chair across from me, Emma's chair, though Emma had her own place now and only visited by invitation. You ready for today? Today. The 6-month anniversary had become something of a personal holiday for me. Not a celebration of almost dying, but a celebration of choosing to live. Really live, not just exist in the spaces other people left for me. I'm ready. I closed the laptop and looked around my kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd eaten cereal alone for years, where I'd sat invisible while my children planned their lives around my absence. But it felt different now. Inhabited. Claimed. The morning news interview went well. The reporter, a sharp young woman named Jessica Martinez, asked thoughtful questions about medical fraud, about how women could protect themselves, about the importance of trusting your instincts, even when authority figures told you to ignore them. Mrs. Chen, she said as we wrapped up, what would you say to women watching this who feel invisible in their own lives? I looked directly into the camera, thinking about all those emails, all those women who'd reached out to say they'd felt seen by my story. I'd say that your life belongs to you. Your body belongs to you. Your voice belongs to you. And no one, not your family, not your doctors, not society, has the right to decide you don't matter. After the interview, Linda and I drove to the cemetery where Robert was buried. I hadn't been there in over a year, couldn't face the way the headstone made me feel like a relic from someone else's life. But today felt different. His grave looked smaller than I remembered. The headstone read, Beloved Husband and Father, which had seemed appropriate 8 years ago but felt incomplete now. Where was beloved Margaret in that equation? When had I become just an appendage to other people's stories? You know what's funny? I said to Linda, who was standing quietly beside me. I spent so many years being Mrs. Robert Chen that I forgot I was Margaret first. Do you miss him? I miss the idea of him. I miss being part of a pair, having someone who was supposed to see me. I knelt down and brushed some fallen leaves off the headstone. But I don't miss disappearing into someone else's definition of who I should be. What do you think he'd say about who you've become? I considered that. Robert had been a good man, but a traditional one. He'd loved me in the way he knew how, but he'd also expected me to be content with being his wife, his children's mother, the woman behind the scenes making everyone else's lives possible. I think he'd be proud, I said finally, and maybe a little surprised. That evening Emma came for dinner. Not because she needed something, not because she felt obligated, but because she wanted to. She'd brought flowers, sunflowers, bright and bold and impossible to ignore. Happy Alive Day, she said, kissing my cheek. We'd started calling it that, Alive Day, the anniversary of choosing life over the slow death I'd been living. It felt more accurate than birthday, more intentional. David hadn't come. David was still angry about the money, about my refusal to bankroll his latest business venture, about my transformation from accommodating mother to independent woman with boundaries. Maybe someday he'd come around. Maybe he wouldn't. I'd learned that I could love my children without requiring them to love me back the way I wanted. Over dinner, Emma told me about her art, about the gallery show that was selling better than anyone expected. I told her about the foundation, about the new partnerships we were forming, about the book I was writing about invisible women and how they could reclaim their voices. Mom, Emma said as we finished dessert, can I ask you something? Always. Are you happy? Not content, not satisfied, but actually happy. I thought about the question as I looked around my kitchen, at Linda reading the newspaper in the living room, at Emma's art supplies scattered on the counter where she'd been sketching earlier, at the stack of letters from women who'd found their voices partly because I'd found mine. Yes, I said, and realized it was completely true. I'm happy. Good, Emma said. You deserve to be. Later, after Emma had gone home and Linda had retired to the guest room, I sat alone in my kitchen for the first time in months. But this wasn't the old loneliness, the aching invisibility I'd carried for years. This was chosen solitude, peaceful and complete. I opened my laptop and began typing a response to the day's emails. Women who were scared, women who were questioning, women who needed to know that someone saw them. Dear friend, I wrote, you are not invisible. You are not disposable. You are not asking for too much when you ask to be seen and heard and believed. Your life matters. Your voice matters. And it's never too late to start living like it. 6 months ago, a lie about dying had taught me how to live. Now, every day I chose to keep living was a small act of revolution. And I intended to keep revolutionizing for a very long time.